What's up, everybody, and welcome to the December 29th, 2023 edition of Why Am I Like This? ? And this is an episode of The Broom, which is a radio station that comes out of a Discord server called The Broom. And if you'd like, you can become a member of this Discord server and join the pot, which is a fairly new development. But in my mind's eye, I see the broom almost like a minaret or a stage from which the pot basically like serves everything that's being cooked up inside the common area of the broom, and also inside many other lineage spaces or ways which exist in the broom. And if you'd like to know more, then you can click on the link which is in the description for this episode on the podcast, whether you're finding it on Spotify or YouTube or maybe Apple Podcasts if I get my shit together soon. But I'll say that Why Am I Like This is a container that I hold where I answer questions that people pose to me. If those questions seem like they could be more useful for me to answer, either and or in long form, in voice, or for more people who pose them to me. I started this container a while ago because I'm pretty loud on social media or some forms of social media, and then some people want to ask me questions, and I don't like to give answers to questions which are like incomplete. And I feel like it's easy to give answers which are incomplete, but I don't think that that's for the best or most cosmic timelines. And honestly, I like to zoom out a little bit and try to give more complete answers, touch upon more topics or touch upon a few topics of metaphysical import, which I feel kind of underlie everything in the physical and also underlie a lot of things in the metaphysical. And if you listen to my likes either on my YouTube channel or on the podcast, now that I've migrated it to the Broom Radio, you probably find that I touch upon the same topics fairly often, hopefully in different ways, and hopefully shedding light on those topics from different perspectives through the perspectives of the questions which I bring into the container of Why Am I Like This allows us to embody some of what I share about those topics a little better, or in more context, or more deeply in more context. I'll also say that Why Am I Like This is a container in which I open portals so that I can channel a vaster being I call Red Star Green Cloud, which is a name that I used to go by. I also call this, you could say, like the spirit of the celestial body that I know is the star system, which I also refer to as the celestial body of the spirit of Sekhmet. And my guarantee for these containers is that I will not cause any context to be enmeshed, and I will disenmesh contexts, and I'll hold space for feedback and refinement, whether it's about me having violated this guarantee or anything else, if it feels aligned. But I make myself available for repair pretty often, pretty much all of the time, I would say. And the question that I felt called to bring up today is a question from somebody I know is Kaizen mentor, and I'm going to read it out. The question is, what has helped you come to peace when financial solutions took a long time to manifest? My stress is increasing, and I'm going to say I want to reduce it so I can work more. Um, and since I want to make this like more of a conversational container overall, I feel like conversations are more enjoyable and a more like full spectrum way to handle topics. I guess I want to ask the people who are here live, which you can also be here live if you join the Broom Discord. And you can also text and unmute if you ask for the role, which we call the pot, so that you have access to the common area. I would like to ask the people who are live here, who are also in the pot, what comes up when I read out this question. And I'll paraphrase it and say, what helps you come to peace with financial problems? What helps you come to peace when financial solutions take a long time to mature? And I guess I'll say, what's the relationship between stress around finances and productivity for you? And I welcome you to unmute or just text and I can read stuff out which comes up. But it says, I love that link. I don't know if I love how I'm feeling about answering this question yet, to be honest with you. But I feel called to try. I feel called to try and disenmesh context around it. And I don't feel called to create any context enmeshment or, what we sometimes call karmic accumulation around this question. I'm going to meditate on it a little bit and I'm going to channel a little bit while I wait for responses. And I'm just going to wait for stuff to land in the waters of my seas or my elixir pools via my channel. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. I'll say that my channel feels very, very different after what I feel like was a shit ton of solar plane or etheric energy bombardment in the lead up to the solstice. And then, of course, like a ton of egregores around the birth of Dominus, which is nowadays assigned to, I would say like a distortion of the spirit of Jesus Christ. And then the full moon in tropical Cancer, which I would say sidereally was a full moon in Gemini, pretty much aligned with right between Castor and Pollux. I would say like my channel is some kind of transformation based on releasing a lot of karmic accumulation, which was triggered by things which showed up in the waking dream as a result of the energies that were coming into the space-time of Earth, I'll say. So this is the first time I've done a session of Why Am I Like This since December 13th or 15th. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes through. I'm going to read something that Intrepid Bodies, Hoda says. I feel like for me, I struggle with finding peace with moments when money is hard to come by. And similarly, find myself getting frustrated around what I was taught regarding money and finding work. Woof! Thank you for your candor. So it hasn't been that clear cut for me, and I'm excited to discuss and listen to what you all may have to share about it. Yeah. few different things came up when I read that. I guess I'm going to start, seems, by talking a little bit about my relationship with money and the relationship that I would say my earth ancestry has with money. And seems like I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationship that my sky ancestry has with money. And somehow I'm going to bring it back in a way that touches upon some of the things that you mentioned, Hoda, and also some of the things that Kaizen Mentor mentioned a long time ago. This question was posed to me a long time ago, and I hope that the financial situation for Kaizen Mentor has gotten better. I'm not going to say sorry for not getting to this question earlier, because I only say sorry when I believe I've done something misaligned, or something which like reifies karma instead of deifying karma. And also when I feel that I can do something to prevent a similar thing showing up in my behavior going forward in a similar context. And I don't feel like I'm going to change the way I get to questions, even though I don't feel good about answering this question so long after it was posed to me. But I know that not everybody has the same approach when it comes to saying sorry, because I find that people say sorry to me a lot of the time when they don't think they've done something wrong, and or when they don't plan to do something different going forward. I feel like most of the time people say sorry to me when they want me to stop talking about the thing they've done. It's kind of just like I'm sure this resonates with the experience of a lot of different people, but I don't know why I'm putting sorry on blast right now. But I'd like to say that I don't say sorry in that way. I also don't say sorry and then go and justify what I did. Because to me, if I'm sorry, then like there's no reason to justify what I did. I'll sometimes explain why I did something, even though I don't want to do it again, just so somebody knows more about who I am and why am I like this. But it's not to excuse my behavior, and it's not to give myself reasons or other people reasons why I'll continue to do that thing. And yeah, this why am I like this nominally has nothing to do with apologizing. And I feel like I've said this before. And maybe it's obvious to people. Maybe it's obvious to people who don't apologize well, I'll say. Like they believe this to be true about what apologies should consist, but still use them in ways which are not consistent with what they feel apologies should consist. But I felt like saying it anyway. Let that be a lesson. So going back to the question, I'll say that my earth ancestors, like a lot of people's earth ancestors, were probably like really poor for a really long time. And when I say poor, I would say that not only that they didn't have capital, which they could use to passively create more capital. I'll say, like, if we're talking about earth ancestry going back hundreds of thousands of years, that applies to most people because we didn't really have capital for a long time. We just sort of like stewarded the land, and then we took things from the land, and we left things with the land, and we took things and left them in other places. And people sometimes call this pollination or indigenous stewardship or like regenerative stewardship of the abundance of earth. It wasn't really like until we started to encapsulate value with objects which didn't really deteriorate, like the use of gold or like shells, coins made out of metals which don't degrade. I would say like property was one of the first times where we started to I'll say play with the thought form complex of capitalism. And then when we had property, like basically when we were marking things out as belonging to people, then it was possible to capitalize on the abundance of that land more easily, um, in order to generate more capital and also to improve the abundance of that land through agriculture. And that's all like fairly recent, like probably in the last 20 to 10,000 years for most lineages. But I'll also say that like a lot of my earth ancestors weren't even rich in the sense that they could decide what they did with their time. Um, but I would say that for a long time they were wealthy in the sense that they didn't feel like they were being coerced as to how they used their time, but more so were moving somewhat intuitively and according to customs which felt intuitive or instinctual, and that activity, and I'd say this is like for a lot of our ancestors, led to the cultivation of the abundance of the land. And then I would say, like, if we fast forward to like a time when capital was more frequently and commonly exchanged and hoarded by different lineages, I'll say that my people didn't have a lot of money, didn't really have very good finances in those times because they were commonly known as like guest people. Um, so this meant that they weren't allowed to own property. They were forced into professional work, which is common to a few other diasporic lineages, um, because they couldn't just hire people to work their property to produce more value, produce more capital with which they could barter or exchange for things that they needed to survive. But they were forced into positions of having to work for other people. And a lot of that time they were cultivating property agriculturally. And then often when capital or finances or the things that we trade money for in order to survive, when those things were scarce, my people tended to get massacred or like moved on, or moved on with the threat of being massacred. Sometimes they did some massacring back. Um, but I say all of this to talk a little bit about the trauma that exists in my earth ancestral lineages, and I'd say this is probably true of a lot of people, especially like a lot of Americans who came from lineages which migrated to America because they were sleeping poverty and other forms of coercion um, in older parts of the world, so to speak. Um, so yeah, I feel like I'm touching upon like what might cause people in current time, in their current incarnations, based on their earth ancestries, to not feel peace when it comes to financial situations or financial solutions arising um, at the pace that they would like them to. And I feel like you could say that the experience of scarcity, the experience of not having enough, the experience of having to like leave one's family in order to gain access to financial means or capital is pretty dysregulating for us, and can imagine being extremely dysregulating for our ancestors who were perhaps like closer to the memory of having a closer relationship to the land, so that being forced off of that land was perhaps more jarring, whereas it's a little bit more normalized for us because in current time, I'd say most people who've been born in the last like 200-ish years, pretty much expect that they're gonna have to like work for somebody else in order to like gain money so that they can eat and maybe one day gain enough money to buy property so that they don't have to pay rent, or that they can use that property in order to capitalize on it, either agriculturally or industrially. So I'd say, in a sense, it's a little bit less jarring um, when we're in that situation in current time, because recent generations of our ancestors have sort of ingested that experience and normalized it, and it's also in all of our media, etc. Um, so I was talking about my earth ancestral money karma, and then I said I was going to talk about my sky ancestral money karma. And yeah, like in past episodes of Why Am I Like This, and also in the pot within the broom and other lineage spaces in the broom, I've talked about how a lot of people tend to use the word past lives, and sometimes they refer to past lives as earth ancestors, and sometimes they refer to past lives as sky ancestors. And sometimes we have sky ancestors who are also earth ancestors. And I'll clarify this by saying that for me, again, earth ancestors are all of the beings who we share genetic code with, um, at multiple levels of that genetic code. Like multiple abstractions, or you could say like multiple geometries that show up in our genetic code. Like people who share those geometries, I would call earth ancestors. And then I would say that sky ancestors are the people that we share space-time bodies with etherically through our heart space. And you could say that like our connection to the other incarnations of those bodies are sky ancestors, and also often what I think people refer to as past lives. And I would also say that some of our sky ancestors also incarnated on Earth, and some of them are also our Earth ancestors. But the difference between sky and Earth ancestry relates to the materiality of the genetic code which connects us to them. But while all of our Earth ancestors incarnated on Earth and died on Earth, I would say that many of us have sky ancestors who also incarnated in different celestial bodies and died on those celestial bodies. Some of us only have sky ancestors who incarnated on Earth, but they might not have incarnated in the lineages which connect us genetically to our Earth ancestors. So we can have sky ancestors who are Earthlings, who are not the same as our Earth ancestors. We can have sky ancestors who are Earthlings, who are in our Earth ancestral Akash. And I would say we can't have Earth ancestors who incarnated in different celestial bodies. So hopefully that's a little bit clear, but I'll say, to go back to what I was saying about money karma with regards to my sky ancestors, I would say money only exists in the consciousness of some celestial bodies. I would say it doesn't exist in most of the consciousnesses that my sky ancestors have incarnated in. And I would say that it existed, of course, in like the human collective consciousness of Earth. It existed in the collective consciousness of Aldebaran and the Pleiades of the collective consciousnesses or celestial bodies which are represented in my sky ancestry. And of course I have sky ancestors who have pretty similar money karma to my earth ancestors. Just like I said, most humans on earth today have a lot of similar money karma, which creates stress even if we do have abundant financial situations. I would say that I have sky ancestors who made a lot of money in bad ways, in ways which were not cosmic. Sometimes because, I would say most people end up making monies in ways which accumulate karma, because they are forced to, or they kind of habituate from other people making money in those ways. I would say that some of my earth ancestors very recently made money in ways that more than more than most of us in current time related to extracting from Earth, or talk about um, doing deals to sell forests to lumber merchants. And then I would say that a lot of my sky ancestors have money karma. Um, I'm just tuning into it and trying to explain in an Earth context. I'm definitely not. I mean, first I'll say that many timelines and possibility planes exist within the celestial bodies of the stars that make up the constellations that we call the Pleiades, Aldebaran, and the celestial body, just like they exist on Earth. Um, I would say that all of those timelines were like rosy and utopic. Um, yeah, I would say like a lot of my sky ancestors also ended up with quite a lot of money. And I am dismembering that stuff now, I feel. Um, but the polarity between having sky ancestors who had ample financial means and then mostly earth ancestors who didn't have ample financial means is very much a lot of, part of my work in this lifetime, I would say, to resolve and harmonize. I would say that it tends to result in me being like very generous when I have money, um, and very stressed when I don't have money. And I would say also that it's resulted mostly due to like the experiences and the capacities of my earth ancestors with making me an incredibly productive person when it comes to pursuits which involve either making money directly or doing things which I feel like unconsciously or consciously may result in me gaining money. And this container is called Why Am I Like This? So this is how I'm starting. Um, yeah, I'm kind of curious if this is ringing any bells for anybody else, or if anybody else wants to talk about the breakdown of their own money karma, either in their current lives or in the lifetime of ancestors or sky ancestors, before I continue. I'll also say that the things which helped our sky ancestors make money might not make money for our earth ancestors because there are different dynamics to making money, especially when it comes to like off earth things. And then a lot of our sky ancestors lived in different periods to our earth ancestors. And I would say also a lot of our sky ancestors occupied different echelons of the societies that they lived in if they were on earth than our current earth ancestors. I'd say like it's often the case that our sky ancestors are not the same as our earth ancestors, so that these polarities can be unified or harmonized or reconciled in our lifetimes. Often stress. Oh, this is, I felt like that was coming up for me too. Um, People are typing, so I'm going to hold a little bit. I'm going to look at the question again. So I feel like while here we go. What it says, that was coming up for me too with regard to, I'm ad-libbing, how periodicity had a lot to do with why my earth ancestry went from pretty rich to being pretty materially poor in a time frame of a few centuries. Wow. Yeah. I was kind of feeling into that, and we've talked a lot about treasure and stuff when it comes to doing energy work with one another. So, um, yeah, that's super interesting karma, and I can kind of see how that I can feel how that might relate to frustration around ways of making money which might not work, which might be a lot of work in current time for y'all. Um, mhm. So, yeah, going back to the crux of the question is like when it comes to finding peace, when financial solutions take a long time to manifest, well, the first thing I'll say is I think it's okay to say what has helped me come to peace when my finances suck. Like, I'm just gonna like put it out there and say that like saying when financial solutions take a long time to manifest feels like something that someone might say if they were told that they should like have a positive mindset and like speak as if things are going to happen the way that they would like them to happen. And I think for me, there is an energetic dynamic to thinking of things like that, but I feel like also it can bypass um, the act of seeing reality as it is. And I also feel like when it comes to manifestation, there are many different levels of manifestation. But one of my favorite ways to manifest is to like actually do shit in the material. And if we have a misperception about material reality, it can be hard to act upon it accurately. So that's the first thing I'll say, which is that I'll reword this and say, what has helped me come to peace when my finances suck? So I would say that, and this is probably going to be repetitive for people who've listened to me before, that my primary way of coming to peace with anything which is causing a lack of peace, which I tend to identify or label or become aware of as tension in my body and or numbness in my body in response to the context I'm in. What I tend to do is I bring awareness to the part of my body that feels tense or numb. And often, in order to find the numb parts, I kind of have to find the places where my body feels alive and then trace them back to the points where they no longer feel alive. And I just like hold my awareness there and I allow my awareness to touch the disorganized energy, which is causing tension or numbness to arise, and then harmonize with it until it becomes organized. And then often I'll experience kriyas or jolts, or I'll feel like, bones and tendons clicking and clacking. I'll feel like fascia unsticking and interstitial tissue um, rearranging itself subtly. And then sometimes I'll get some sense of what was causing me stress. And I would say that all of this applies to stress which relates to finances. Um, Often I'll also work astrally, which is to say symbolically or mythically or imaginally. And sometimes I'll just find thoughts coming into my head which are often triggered by disorganized energy in my body. And I'll find myself thinking about like worst case scenarios. Um, what happens if, I get a big bill? What happens if the things that I'm doing for money don't end up making money? Um, what happens if I never find more customers for my business? And, I feel like this is a fairly common technique in meditation, but I'll just like not focus on those thoughts, but feel into them somatically again. Like they have a certain texture, noise, or color in my awareness. And then without grasping onto those thoughts, I almost feel like I'm kind of building out a container to surround those thoughts. And this is just another way that I would say that I can harmonize that energy and hold space for it to reorganize itself. And then I would say often I channel light language in the form of dance or sound or movement. And all of these techniques help me to provide what I sometimes call noise cancelling vibrations for the vibrations which are causing these intrusive thoughts or tension or numbness to arise in my body, whether it relates to financial solutions taking a long time to manifest, or whether it relates to finances sucking for me, whether it relates to anything else, which I'll say resonates with the disorganized energy / karma of my earth ancestors or my sky ancestors or my current time incarnation. And then I'll say that when the noise of that disorganized energy can be cancelled out and the energy can become reorganized or crystalline, then the tension disappears when I encounter those contexts again, or I experience a quietening in intrusive thoughts about things which resonated with that karma, or I experience those thoughts only in different contexts, or I experience those thoughts less overall. And then, since I'm talking about the metaphysical, and I've been talking about it for quite a while, I don't want to bypass the material. Further to what I said about manifesting in the material being one of my favorite ways to manifest. But I'll say that often when I want to say work more, to borrow a phrase from the question, or when I want to work on certain things, and tension or numbness attends those thoughts, or if I find those thoughts kind of like jumping into my body in a way which doesn't feel authentic. And to go further on that, I'll say that I'm not the kind of person who says that you shouldn't have any thoughts at all, but I am the kind of person who believes that thoughts are enculturated by our fields, our energetic bodies or our subtle bodies. And there is a difference for me between a knowing or a thought, something that comes to me either orally or verbally or through imagery. There's a different feeling when that hits my body through my channel versus when it was triggered from my upper chakras by disorganized energy. Something's coming through right now. Yes, I'll say that these behaviors which are attended by tension and numbness, or by the feeling that something is being triggered by disorganized energy in my field, tend to reify financial karma, which is to say that if I follow them, if I allow myself to give attention, which is for me a heightened form of awareness or more charged form of awareness, if I give attention to these behaviors or these thoughts when they come from tension or numbness or disorganized energy that triggers thought forms which live in my upper chakras, or more specifically the default mode network of my brain, then not only do those things tend to create more tension going forward or reinforce neural pathways, I would say that they often don't assuage or give me any relief from the fear which is at the core of that disorganized energy. Which is to say that the things that cause that energy to become disorganized in the first place, which I often refer to as trauma or conditioning, which gets attached to by thought form complexes or behavioral patterns, and eventually like neural networks, and is triggered by the presence of tension and numbness or disorganized energy, they tend to increase the intensity of the fear that I feel in the context where I give attention to those behavioral patterns or thought forms. And when I'm able to harmonize those thought forms and then harmonize and reorganize the energy in which those thought forms root, I would say that A, I feel more peaceful. B, since my energy is reorganized, my field is more crystalline, so I can channel more clearly and see the thoughts which form within that more crystalline, subtle body or field allow me not only to do things which relate to solving my financial stresses, but also do things which have nothing to do with my financial stresses. Because often I feel like I have to do things even if I don't actually have to do them, or they don't put me on timelines where I make more money. And I would say that I overall exert less effort and experience more joy. And I would also say that that joy often comes with less financial abundance, but sometimes also comes from financial abundance, which rises from joyful work. So to look at the second part of the question, which says, my stress is increasing and I want to reduce it so I can work more. My sense is that that desire to work more is such a thought form complex or behavioral pattern, which is rooted in disorganized energy relating to financial trauma in your earth ancestry, which of course percolates into your present life, and also in sky ancestry, which also percolates into the present life. And that my way of finding peace so that I can do works in the material is as I described. And I would also say that immaterially, what happens with those awful complexes for me, immaterial, in addition to obstructing material action, which results in more joy, less effort, and often better finances, is that those thought forms realize that they get more of our attention when financial stress is triggered. So they work with the thought forms that are attached to other people's fields, which could obstruct other people from working with us or from giving us money, or even from treating us well so that we experience less financial stress in non-financial ways. Those thought forms collaborate to create situations where we may feel more stress in general and also more financial stress, so that they can get more of our attention when we feel that stress, because that tends to trigger tension, numbness, and thinking that comes from thought form complex, which are firmly lodged in our default mode networks. So I would say that resolving and tracking down the things which cause stress, somatically, astrally, through channeling, is a more holistic way to find peace. I would say that in my lifetime, due to all of the factors that I've experienced before, I became very good at working very hard to get more money. But even when I had more money, I would say my stress, this is kind of cliche, but I wouldn't say my stress lessened in any way. I'll just say that the things I thought about involved more money because I had money to lose. And I also felt like I needed a more expensive lifestyle so that I could make myself feel better or recuperate more effectively from the stress that was causing me to work very hard. And I would say that at a metaphysical level, even though I was working in ways which the Matrix deemed to be effective, even though I was making more money, I was strengthening the connections between that disorganized energy relating to money karma and the thought form complexes that made me work harder. So I was sort of on this like treadmill of being stressed and working harder, and it kept on going faster and faster until I couldn't work any harder for any longer. And then I was forced via breakage to address my fear around money in a different way. I'm going to read the chat really quickly. Seeing clapping and mapping and agreement. Please disagree, or please, unmute or text if you want to add anything. I'm very curious, what caused me to want to channel on this as well. I'm not saying that my financial situation couldn't improve. Definitely could. But I am also thinking about the treasure chest that appeared in the session that we did in Dojo. Anyway, I guess I'm feeling like I can close the container if nobody has any questions. I will be editing this and uploading it to the Broom Radio podcast if I can salvage something from it. And I want to say thank you for joining me for this container. And if you want to join this container live, then please join our Discord server. It happens every Venus Day or Friday at 8 p.m. Sofia time, 1 p.m. New York time, etc., etc. Thank you again for joining, and I'll talk to you all soon. Peace. Peace, Craig.